Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Story Selling Strategies for B2B Entrepreneurs. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I'm a program assistant at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you will see in the chat in the moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So check out those resources and links in the chat. And just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. So throughout the session, please submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will try our best to get to all of them. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. And so before we get started, I'm just going to launch a quick poll to step back and take a temperature gauge on how everyone's feeling today. And we use this information to guide the wellness programs that we provide for our global community of entrepreneurs. So it's going to ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? Give you guys a second to submit some answers. All right. Perfect. I'm going to end that poll and share the results. Looks like optimism is well in the lead, but we definitely have some feelings of anxiety and survival. So hopefully some of what we talk about today will address those feelings. All right, and without further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest, Bernadette McClelland. She is a sales, leadership, and story selling expert and speaker. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bernadette. We're so grateful to have you here.
It's an absolute pleasure, and welcome to everybody that's on the call today. I'm going to kick off now by sharing my screen.
Perfect.
And we'll get this show on the road. So just give me a thumbs up if you can see that screen. Awesome. Awesome. So story selling strategies for B2B entrepreneurs. So we're going to kickstart this off right now. And I want to make sure that you're in the right place first and foremost. So you are in the right place if you are a sales leader, an entrepreneur, a seller, or a business leader, and you want to win more business. And it was really heartening to see so many of you feel going into the next year optimistic. So this is wonderful. You're in the right place if you're growth focused. If you're not attracted because of problems and just to get your stuff for free, but you truly want to increase your sales figures out there in the most strategic way. And third, you're in the right place if you're someone who's an action taker and a decision maker. So I want you to key in the chat whether or not you are one of these action takers, an optimistic action taker that we're going to go into 2023 needing out there in the business world. So key that into the chat. And while you're there, what I want you to do is to key in where you are from and what your role actually is. And the reason why I want to do that is so that I can make sure that everything that I share today is relevant to all of you. So please just key in the chat where you are from and what your role is. Wonderful. Aspiring entrepreneur as a military veteran. I love that. South Florida, would love to be down there at the moment. Wonderful. Co-founder. Excellent. Consultant, senior VP. Wonderful. Okay, guys, that's just giving me a real taste of kind of who's in the room. So my promise to you is to share with you 3 distinct stories that are going to help you not just win business, but also help differentiate you out there in the marketplace. For those of you that stay to the end, I'm also going to give away a bonus tool that you can use that's going to help you in one of those stories. And so at the end of this, it'll probably go for about 40 to 45 minutes if my style resonates with you, and then there's an opportunity there for you to have some contact with me, and if you wanted to continue that conversation. So let me just clear that. And the gift that I'm going to give you is the Money Mindset Shifter, and it's a 5-page document that's going to help you with your money mindset, because as we know, in sales and entrepreneurship, financials and our mindset around money is such a driving factor. Okay, today is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be sharing ideas with you that you may not have heard before, or you may have heard them before, but perhaps in a different way. Story selling is more than storytelling, and that's the distinction that I want to make, and that's why today is going to be a little bit different. This is not going to be your usual, this is how we tell a story, follow Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. This is not storytelling. We're going to be looking at story selling, and it's really all about disrupting your way of thinking about going to market. And by disrupting your way of thinking, it's going to help you disrupt your buyer's way of thinking when you're in having commercial conversations with them. It's based on the disciplines of psychology, definitely story. Mental models is something that I bring into it, and also looking at the discipline of coaching and NLP. Because if we can look at our sales as more than just kind of like that tradesperson with a hammer and everything he sees is a nail, but if we can look at all these different disciplines, almost like the sales Swiss Army knife, it's going to make us even more effective out there today. And so this is stuff, it's not going to be fluff, it's going to be stuff that works. So what I would love to know is, in your role at the moment, what is the hardest part of your role when it comes to having those sales conversations? So I would love for you to key that into the chat. And once again, this is going to give me more context around how I deliver these ideas today. So if you can share what you find is the hardest part of your role in the context of having sales conversations with your prospects, then that's going to be really helpful for all of us. Not sounding too salesy. Okay, I am going to jot a couple of these down. Not asking for money. Okay. So pushing a sale is difficult. Trust. Okay, buy-in. Just jotting a couple of these down. Battling identity on the internet. Absolutely. What to do if they're not ready to buy at the moment? Okay. Fear of rejection. Okay, so there's quite a few mixed bag answers there. Conversions. Yeah, we'll look at that as well. And making it simple. And yes, in today's complex world, it is up to us to make the complex simple for our buyers. So thank you very much for that. I really do appreciate those insights. I'm just going to move, okay, that up. So let's have a look at what I guess the big idea around today is, and also the big idea that sits as an overarching premise for you and your business, and that is transformation. So when I talk about transformation, it is how can we transform your conversations and make them more transformational engagements that you have with your buyer? How can we do that by strengthening our connections? How can we look at our customers and how can we start to have more valued conversations with them? And thirdly, from a business perspective, how can we get more conversions? And so we kind of bucket that into the word transformation. And so I'm going to do a little something different. It's a little something I prepared earlier for you. And I am going to walk you through a model that is based on, I guess, my experience out there in the marketplace as to what most of my buyers want, and potentially these could be your buyers as well. So I like to create models, and I mentioned before that mental models is part of the story selling philosophy. So if we consider for a moment what most of our buyers want and what you guys want is conversions. Okay, so that's really what we're talking about in this particular perspective here. So this is my conversion quadrant, if you like. And so I look at this and I think, well, okay, what are the two parameters that I believe need to be looked at in order for conversions to increase? And so when I'm out in the field with my VPs of sales, my sales leaders, my sales teams, there's a couple of key things. One is, and don't mind my back, I should say. One are the connections that we make. I hope you can see that. That says connections. And when we look at connections, I think to myself, well, okay, some connections are really low level connections. And of course, up here are our high level connections. So that's one way that I look at it. The other way is to say, well, okay, and I'm hoping that you can see this, down here are the conversations that we have with our buyers. And are those conversations low quality or low value, or are they high value? Now, this is where it gets interesting, because some of you on the call here today, I mean, all of you are going to fit somewhere here. And so if you are somebody who is able to get an appointment with a high-level decision maker, but you are not able to have those high-quality, high-value conversations, and I'm not sure if you're seeing all of this or not, then you are the one who is going to experience rejection. And you're going to be the one that says, they're not calling me back, or I'm just not winning any business. If, on the other hand, you are somebody who can have high quality, high value conversations, but you're not getting to see the right person, then you're going to experience nothing but frustration. And you're going to be saying to yourself, what am I doing wrong? You know, how do I get in front of the right people? And how do I win more business? And of course, down here, well, if it's not termination, it's stagnation. So we want to be able to identify where we sit in this. And what I want you to do now is I want you to determine where you sit in this. Which quadrant do you feel that you fit in? Are you someone who gets in front of the right people but just can't have the right conversations? Or are you somebody that can have the right conversations, but you're just not getting in front of the right people? So key in for me just which quadrant you think that you fit into. Because where we want to get to is up here. Conversion. When you are able to have the right conversations with the right people, and you're able to have the right conversations with the right people, that's when you're going to start converting more. So we have mixed bag answers here. High level connection, low quality conversations, not getting to the right people, frustration. So we all know, all of us, even myself, I fit into these categories as well. So I'm just going to move this to the side for a minute so it's not a distraction, because I've actually got it here. And so this is something that I share with my decision makers, because what it does is it creates an opportunity for us to collaborate together. And so I want to know, and you don't have to answer this on the chat at all, but I want to know, what story are you telling yourself that is impacting your results right now? And on a scale of 1 to 10, now this is something you could answer on the chat. On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to shifting the needle in order to convert more opportunities? So this forms the beginning of understanding the concept or the philosophy behind story selling. Because the reality, and thank you very much for those of you that are putting your scores there, that was really more for you than me. Because the reality today that all of us are facing out there is that 72% of time that sellers and sales professionals are spending on, that's what they are spending on sales-related activities. But those sales-related activities are not in front of the buyer. Only 28% of buyers' time is spent having those buyer conversations. And that research is from Korn Ferry. Now, if we take this amount of time spent in front of the client or the buyer, 71% of those conversations, or rather of those conversations, 71% of buyers are saying that these sellers, entrepreneurs, professionals, consultants, their value is not worth my time. And that's the RAIN group have given us that. And then we look at the fact that 53% of businesses and sellers are not achieving quota. Then we look at that quadrant and we think, something's got to be done in both of those two areas of connections and conversations. And unfortunately, not in this group, because you guys are so optimistic, but even within the optimists, there is still 63% who are going home burned out, desperate, and stressed by not being able to get those conversions happening. And it's like Groundhog Day. It's just the same old, same old. So what I want us to realize is, okay, what can we do differently in front of our buyers so that we can shift the dynamics of those statistics? And so we've all heard about the seller's journey, and we've all heard about the buyer's journey. And I'm not being cynical here, but the buyer's journey is kind of like the worked around seller's journey in my book. It's kind of just like, a rose by any other name is still a rose. So I'm kind of looking at this and thinking, okay, how can I bring some thought leadership to the table? How can I look at this buyer's journey a little bit differently? And so I think that at the end of the day, every one of our buyers, in such a risky environment in their mind, they just don't want to be served. They absolutely want service. They absolutely want to know that someone's going to serve them, but they also want to feel safe and secure in their decisions. And so that's what they want. We go to the market to sell. And so if we think about the fact that they want to be served and feel safe, but we keep going to the market pushing and selling, they get skeptical. It's another salesperson. How can I differentiate, how can we differentiate ourselves from them? Because every call, they're getting the same questions, not just from your competitors, but other vendors, other suppliers, other salespeople out there. And so they're so skeptical. How would it be if we shifted our thinking a little bit and we went to the market to strategically shift their thinking, so that when they're driving home that afternoon or that night, or they're turning off their computer for the day or whatever it is, And they're thinking, and they're sitting at that red light, and they're thinking, you know what? That question Bernadette asked me, that model she drew, that's got me thinking. That's what we want to have happen. We want our buyers, we want to start shifting our buyers' thinking. And so when we do that, the buyer concern that is there changes to buyer confidence. And if you think about yourself for a minute and you think, okay, if I'm just going to the market to sell, there's a certain energy around that. There's a certain push. If I go to the market to serve, well, there's a different energy again. You know, they may not, you know, you just might be somebody nice to deal with. But if you go to the market with an intention to shift their thinking, that is a game changer. So I want to know, key it in the chat, which level do you, hand on heart, which level do you typically operate from? Selling, serving, or strategizing, shifting their thinking? So let us know in the chat, and I'll just have this glass of water. Serving, 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 strategizing, excellent. Serving, but we'll be shifting to strategy. Great, awesome. That's what I want to see. Action takers, decision makers. Okay, so the premise is that you are just one story selling conversation away from the business growth you deserve. And I want to share with you a couple of ways to do that. But first of all, you're probably thinking, who is she? She speaks really funny. I have come from Australia, so I am Australia living in Colorado. But just to give you a quick snapshot of my journey is a few years ago, as you can tell, I was at Xerox as a sales coordinator, and I wanted to go into sales. And 3 times they told me that I didn't have what it took to be in sales because I wasn't aggressive enough and was too nice. Well, I showed them that I can be quite assertive, and I got the job. 20 years later, I left that company as one of the most senior and as specialists in a very senior sales executive role. After that, life-changing situations occurred, and 10 years ago, my husband and I found ourselves on welfare in Australia, and we were liquidated our business and were declared bankrupt. So 10, 11 years ago. So it's been a journey for me, and I've leaned in on the ability to be able to help shift people's thinking. And a lot of that came from a decision that I made 10, 11 years ago to really amp up the ability for me to coach and to be a sales coach, business coach, executive coach, all of those wonderful things. And for those of you that know of Anthony Robbins, I was invited to be his coach for his platinum clients in the Asia Pacific region across 12 countries. That then led me to also contributing to Harvard and working with the MBA students on the sales component of their MBA. And then just a year ago today, I had my interview with the US consulate whilst in Melbourne, and 5 weeks later got my green card. And so since March of this year, my husband and I are now permanent residents of the United States of America, hence me being here with you today. And I also speak as a result on story selling now on main stages around the world and consult to companies and sales teams on how to actually differentiate themselves out there in the marketplace through story selling. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot of, I guess, the journey that I've had from an entrepreneurial perspective, but also from a sales perspective and personal perspective, because everything is rolled together these days. So what's my goal for you today? My goal for you today, there's a couple of outcomes that I want. I want you to realize that rewiring our thinking can be easier. I want us to go from a mindset of selling widgets to a mindset of selling wisdom. And I just want you to realize that, imagine if some, Magellan, I think it was Magellan, it might have been Columbus, I don't know, I get them all mixed up. But what if they still thought the world was flat? What if Alexander Graham Bell was quite comfortable with the telegraph, sending information down the wire and kind of didn't go with the telephone. Imagine if we didn't have our phones today. So at some stage, somebody shifts their thinking and rewires their thinking to begin getting different results. I want to bring out your X factor because all of us are different. We're all different, but we're all the same. And I want us to be able to communicate that differentiation in a way that is authentic and in a way that is so aligned to our values. And thirdly, hey, let's make more money, not just for us, but for our customers and also our company, and to make it a real win-win-win. So what is story selling? I've kind of shared a little bit with you so far, but what I want you to realize story selling is, it inspires change. Okay, World Economic Forum tells us now that the skill set needed for moving forward is creativity, critical thinking, and complex problem solving. And if we're going to the market to sell, we have to bring those factors into play, because just selling off a brochure is just no longer, it's just not going to cut it. It's story selling is root cause focused. You know, I shared the story how my husband and I went bankrupt. Well, I actually had an accident with a forklift and it did tissue damage. I was sent to the hospital, they bandaged it up, gave me some typical antibiotics and just said, go home. But little did they know that there was something happening underneath the surface and didn't diagnose correctly. The next step was being put into hospital and put on a drip of penicillin for 3 full days. Once again, no one was listening to me telling them what I thought was wrong, and it was self-diagnosed again. A year in bed due to my liver failing off the back of a shin damage, tissue damage accident, and we went bankrupt and everything else happened. Now imagine today that our buyers are self-diagnosing their own problems, which they are, and imagine if they're wrong. Imagine if we go to the market and we diagnose incorrectly because we're not asking the right questions. It could be catastrophic for that buyer as well. So story selling is very root cause focused. It's strategy in pictures, as you're starting to see. It's de-risks decisions, because today the biggest risk or the biggest thing that's going to stop your buyer from saying yes to you, and the reason why everybody says maybe now, it's not the risk of you uncovering their need. It's not the risk behind your solution not being the right solution or not. The biggest risk is their price that they're going to pay if you haven't uncovered the cost of the problem. Because why would they go with you if their biggest concern was what happened after the sale? Will I lose my job? Will the company get an ROI? Are they promising what they deliver? So we've got to get the cost of the problem up front. It increases collaboration. As you can see, by drawing these models in front of you, if you're in front of a buyer and having a coffee and you pull out the serviette and you start doing your own model, you lean in more and you collaborate more. It's more buyer focused. And of course, story selling is all about generating wisdom and generating meaning in the communication. So I'm going to pull out my trusty whiteboard again, because what is story selling really? And so let's have a look at this. I looked at this and I thought, okay, what's something I can bring to the market to really help my clients? So we know we've already gone through this, because this was, I'll use a different color. This was on the previous model that I drew. Connection with the right level people, conversations, and having the right value, quality conversations. And here is conversions. Now that's all good and well. We know that. But the magic of the story selling circles, the magic behind story selling, aren't these 3 data sets. The magic happens at the intersections. So here, the magic is between the connection and the conversations you have are the internal stories that you tell yourself about the buyer, the internal stories you tell yourself about the deal, the internal stories you tell yourself about the value. Here, at the intersection of the conversations you have and the conversions are the external stories. What are those stories that you actually tell your buyer? What are those stories? And then the intersection here of the conversions and deeper connection are the stories that are so often missed. And these are what we call the essential stories. The essential stories are seeking the buyer stories. And so this is the story selling circles, which forms the basis of story selling. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, and this is what I did, I looked at this and I thought, very pretty, makes sense, very commercial, but how do we do this? And so I took it a step further. And there's the model, which you guys will be able to see on the replay. Took it a step further and I said, okay, we have to look at the actual stories that we tell. And so it was wonderful to hear some of you at the beginning when I asked about, some of the hardest parts of selling, and a number of you, brought up internal stories. And so if we start here and we look at identity, are we enough? Are we congruent? Authority and money. The external stories, we look at guiding change, progression, tension, and integration. How do we build a certain amount of intensity and tension with our buyers? And how do we articulate outcomes? And the essential stories are how do we show flexibility and be more clarity-based, leverage that? How do we identify the buyer's criteria? And how do we land business? And so what I want to do with you today is I want to take you through 3 of those. And so we're gonna look at those 3 right now. And let's start with, and I'm doing it in a way that these are 3 mistakes that I see out there in the marketplace. And it doesn't matter whether it's businesses through Tony Robbins, corporate, through, Xerox days, it doesn't really matter. We all, in one way, shape, or form, make these mistakes. So let's go through these. Mistake number 1 is you make money mean something. So the takeaway there is to treat money as a commodity. So 65%, this is out of 2 million salespeople, by the way, through the Objective Management Group, 65% of sellers, whether you're a salesperson, employee, or a business owner, 65% have difficulty discussing money. And of those 65%, 50% are less likely to close business. And this is the amount of research that's being done into this. Clonce and Clonce is the research that I've been using. The reasons behind that is that by the age of 7, we have already learned and have already adopted our money beliefs. Money is generational. So the conditioning that we have as individuals through our family plays such an important part, and it's so unconscious. It happens unconsciously. It's really interesting. I remember I was about 12 or 13 at the time. I have no idea what the conversation was about, but my dad and my Uncle Andrew were talking, and I'm standing there and I'm kind of watching and listening to them. I don't know what it was, but I asked my Uncle Andrew, I said, Uncle Andrew, how much do you get paid? And my dad pulled me aside later and he said, don't you ever ask anyone how much they get paid or who they vote for. And so imagine now that I'm in my teens Imagine now that I'm 25, I'm going into sales. And I have to start asking people how much money they've got to spend, what's their budget, talk to me about financials, let's discuss ROI. Those conversations for me were very, very difficult. In fact, in a lot of instances, I never even asked those questions. And so this is why we've got to realize that how we view money is critical in our success in selling. And it's more than just asking for what's your budget. It's so much deeper than that. And so when I'm in front of a group of sales team, I'll often hold a $100 note up and I'll give it to someone to hold. And they'll put it in the palm of their hand, or they'll just leave it on the desk, and I'll ask the question, what will you do with this $100 if I was to give it to you? Because I never give it to them. Inevitably, lunch, buy a pair of shoes, pay a bill. Not that you can do much with $100 today, but you get my point. Money is so emotional, and we tie so much emotion to money that we need to be able to separate it and have it become a commodity. Because how I see it show up in business today, people believe, like, I can't ask that because the buyer's paying out of their own pocket. I don't think so. There is always money to be found. There are always different budgets for those reasons. Keeping up with the Joneses is another sign that I see of somebody that has money beliefs, because they're so entrenched in what they think other people think of them. What does a lot of money sound like to you? If you think $1,000 is a lot of money and you're selling something for $10,000, there's going to be a disconnect in your brain, and it's going to make money become an awkward conversation. So my question to you is, what do you make money mean? And I want you to kind of like take that away as a thought, so that when you're sitting at the traffic lights tonight or turning your computer off, you kind of start to think, well, what does money mean to me? And so to help you there at the end of today, I'm going to give you access to the Money Mindset Shifter, and that's going to potentially help a few of you. So from a prescription perspective, let's look at what you can do here to kind of address this internal story of money. And that is, get used to talking about money. So many people feel uncomfortable talking about money with their family, or whatever it may be. I don't know if there's many women on this call, but I don't know about you, but I have seriously come home with a pair of shoes and told my husband it was on special. They were on special when they weren't. And it's like, why did I do that? So start to get used to talking about money a little more differently. Add an extra zero to what you think a lot of money is. Because as I said, if you think $100 is a lot and, something costs $1,000, just start to add that up. Amp that up, I should say. And I'm going to share this with you as a really big distinction, and that's let your buyer say no. So in the past, in corporate, I have not sold the bigger, let's just say the bigger piece of equipment, because I thought it was a lot of money. And so because I thought it was a lot of money, my fear was that if I sold that to them, they would say no. When in actual fact, that was none of my business. So let your buyer say no. Okay, so let's keep moving on. Give me a thumbs up if this is resonating with you. Okay, let's keep moving. Beautiful. Thank you, Dawn, for the triple thumbs up, making me feel good. So how much untapped revenue would you predict could flow from your pipeline right now if you shifted your story around money? What do you think? Just have a think about that one. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how effectively have you thought about those conversations from an abundance mindset in the past few days, on a scale of 1 to 10? So let's move on to mistake number 2. You are not strategic enough. So what do I mean by this? Well, if you think of something, or if you think of the word strategy, it's really planned thinking. It's really thinking ahead of time and planning your sales conversation. Now, I'm bringing story into this a little bit, but it's not the story that you might have thought that you were going to learn today, which is, the beginning, the middle, and the end, or act 1, act 2, act 3, or, and this happened and that happened, but that happened, therefore that happened. It's not about that. And we aspire to that style of storytelling in our story selling philosophy. But it's not about that. This is about you being strategic. And if you think about stories as being our oldest form of communication, you think about oral stories. So usually stories are oral, and you think back to, the great philosophers like Homer and Aristotle and all of that, and they had their audiences around and they would tell these oral stories. Stories are also written, and they go way back as well, 4,000 years ago, way back to clay tablets and the monks and how they used to document things on clay tablets. So we know stories are visual, are also written rather. They're also visual. We just need to think of the hieroglyphics in Egypt. And it's this visual side that I really want to focus in on from a strategic perspective. So if you think for a moment that we do most of our storytelling orally, and we hear these stories, but research tells us that 10% of hearing data or hearing stories is forgotten 3 days later. Our ears are logical, but our sight, we process 65% of data through sight. And so if we think about the fact that selling is, people buy an emotion and they back it up with logic, telling a story orally, hearing a story is, we process 11% through our ears, and there's 83% through our eyes. So why don't we make the most of visual story selling in our conversations? I was driving, it was a couple of months ago now, my girlfriend texted me. She knew that I was going to an event, and there's a highway, freeway, interstate, whatever you call it here, number 6 on the 6. She said, I hope you're not going the 6. She said, there's been a 100-car pileup. And it was on the news. I heard it on the news. A couple of days later, just around the corner from where I live, there was a 3-car crash. And I saw it. What do you think is sticking in my mind? What I saw or what I heard? So we need to be very, very strategic. And when I talk about strategy and visuals, I'm talking about data, strategy-driven stories. We all know Maslow's hierarchy. This is a progression story, what I refer to as a progression story. It's aspirational. We all know the BCG matrix. Most of us would know the BCG matrix. There's tons of 2x2s out there. Stephen Covey's important versus urgent. This is a tension model. So the progression is the why, the tension is the what. And for those of you that know Jim Collins' Good to Great and the hedgehog principle, this is the Venn diagram. This is integrating those things, and this teaches you how. So Charlie Munger, who is the COO of Berkshire Hathaway, is so successful because he lives by models. He lives by visual stories. And he says the first rule is that you can't really know anything if you just remember isolated facts and try and bang them back. If the facts don't hang together on a latticework of theory, you don't have them in a usable form. You've got to have models in your head. So you've already seen 3 of my models. You've seen the 2x2, you've seen the Venn diagram, and you saw the first one about shifting the buyer's thinking. And you're going to remember those versus me just standing here and kind of like talking head to you about what you should do. And so these are three of mine. Now, do you think that I can go into a buyer knowing, being prepared, being totally strategic? And at any point, do I use all three? Absolutely no. But do you think if I needed to explain why or what or how, they would be embedded in my thinking? I could then grab a whiteboard, a serviette over coffee, put this together, and then it becomes a collaborative effort. And I get the data behind it by and through the buyer. So think about the first pictures you drew when you were a child, or if any of your parents, and you think back to the first pictures your children drew, they were of circles, squares, and triangles. And that's why I wanted to bring the simplicity of mental models as being a different version of the stories that we tell our buyers. So here's three ways, three prescriptions that you can take away. Understand why your buyer is on their journey. Collaborate on what they believe it will take to achieve their outcome. Share how you can help them by prescribing a solution to the root cause of their problem. So what level of engagement and collaboration would you create if you were to bring insights to the table through mental models? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And then on a scale of 1 to 10 again, how prepared and competent are you right now in leading a conversation with this level of value? Making it all about the client story. That is the key. The stories we tell have got to be the client stories. Does it mean that we don't tell our own? Absolutely not. Of course, we still do. But this is the whole point of today. So moving on to mistake number 3, and that is that your conversations don't get to the root cause. Now, I shared earlier about the diagnosis, my diagnosis. This is my husband and I in Chicago on one of our trips over from Australia. And there was a group of people that were in the city centre, and they had the sign saying free hugs. And I went up to the girl on my right, Marguerite, her name was, and I said, what's this story? What's this thing, this campaign about free hugs? And seriously, her answer really kind of took me by surprise. She said, it doesn't matter whether people are wealthy or if they are on welfare. She said, our hugs save lives. And I thought, wow, that's one hell of a value proposition. And so for us today, if we want to go deeper into the client conversation, we can't just keep swimming on the surface. Okay, we've really got to add depth to our thinking so that we can help add depth to our buyers' thinking. And so we've really got to understand what change means to our buyers. And this is where bringing in coaching skills and neuroscience comes into play, because we've got to stop, we've got to take our foot off the telling pedal. And we've got to start putting it on the seeking pedal. And one of the ways to do that is to gain clarity as to the different levels within a conversation. And so I'm going to walk you through a clarity model that it's going to look a little busy, but I'm going to put it up in its entirety rather than kind of stepping it through, because I want us to realize that there are 3 different levels to a conversation. And the clarity seeking story model here, I call it big C to little c. So if you think about the fact that C-level decision makers are visionaries, okay, they are interested in the big picture. They're not interested in the bits and bytes and spicks and specks of your product at all. In fact, if we go back to our quadrant, the person who can get in front of the right decision maker and starts talking about specifics will lose the credibility. So you need to be able to bring your conversation up to a much higher contextual level. And so what I've put there is the arrows going up is context, like what's this all about? You know, what's the purpose? What's your thinking behind this, Mr. Decision Maker, to really get that bigger conversation happening? The content, the bottom one, is where you're asking someone for specifics. You know, what is a specific example that you can tell me? What happened specifically to make you think that way? And of course, going across the middle is the idea itself. And you want to expand on that idea and let the buyer do all the talking. Let them do the heavy lifting. So that's really interesting. What else? What else? Or how else? Or who else? And so when you can start to play around with this clarity model a little more, your conversations will start to get fuller. They'll start to have more depth to them, more substance to them. And instead of just it being all about you pushing a product. So that's my, I guess, short version of the clarity model. And I guess 3 prescriptions that you can use there is to actually introduce a coach approach. It's what I call a coach approach to selling. And seriously, if I had known how to coach my clients back in corporate days, I know I would have won more business, because coaching is all about seeking stories. And so this is why these are the essential stories that I teach, because it's about eliciting your buyer's stories, because that's where the gold is. But you've got to do the work. Okay, you do have to do the work. It's different. And strategic means learning how to play out your own mental models and go to a conversation a little bit more prepared. So how deep are you taking your conversations, and are you able to elicit the real meaning behind your buyer's desire for change and their fear of change? I mean, these are conversations for another time, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how many more opportunities could you close if you were focused more on the buyer psychology versus the buyer process? So there's some food for thought there. So this has been quite a big session. I want to thank you for hanging in there, but I want us to also recap and I want to refresh your memory, your thinking. And so you are just one story selling conversation away from the business growth you deserve. One of these ideas today will help you win business. We've looked at the real buyer's journey. You know, we've looked at the fact that if we keep going to the market just to sell, we're going to be hit with skepticism. We go to the market to serve, not as much, but it still won't get you over the line. Strategizing and shifting their thinking, that's the game changer. We've looked at where you are on the tension quadrant: frustration, rejection, stagnation / termination, or conversion. We've looked at the 9 story modes that fit into the story seller circles. And we've also looked at the clarity model. I want to know what resonated with you guys. So please key in the chat what resonated the most with you from today. And I will have another sip of water. And be prepared to see who says what. All of it. Coaching sales model. Yeah. Thank you. Changing. Shifting a buyer's thinking. Amazing array of schools. Oh, I'll pay you for that one later. Shifting a buyer's thinking, meaning money, making money meaning something. There's so much in this. And if you let the buyer say no, absolutely. There's so much gold in this. And the thing is, it is not teaching you how to overcome an objection or how to close a deal. Those days are gone, okay? We're in a different world now. And so we've got to start to think a little differently. So next steps. I did promise you that I would give you access to the money making mindset document, and I'm going to do that right now. Here is the QR code, and if you wanted to go straight to 13moneybeliefs.com, you'll be able to download it from there. Before I go, though, there is something I heard this week I'm in a mastermind group, and I had posed the question in this mastermind group that said, you know, not many of us are good at asking for help. And Meredith, the author who was actually doing the program, she said, here's the difference. She said, so often we think we've got to do, and we ask, what is it that I need to do to move forward? She said, it's not what you do, it's who you ask. And it's all about speed to market. So I'm going to ask you to do one little thing for me, because all of this data, a lot more of it is gone into a book that I've just finished writing. It needs to be edited and all the rest of it. It's not ready to buy yet, but I have got some covers that I would love for you guys to share. Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4 that jumps out at you? Because this is like a numbers game. And I really want to get a cover for this book that resonates with entrepreneurs like yourself. So just key that in the chat, and I will wrap up now. I really, really want to thank you. I want to thank the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center for this opportunity. And most of all, those of you that want to connect with me, please just connect with me on LinkedIn or any of these spots. And
thank you. Thank you so much, Bernadette. That was absolutely incredible. I personally learned so much, so I truly appreciate it. And we at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center all do as well. I'm going to launch one last quick poll, and this one's going to ask, what's keeping you up at night? And this will also just help guide some of our future wellness programs. So let's see. We got some finance, sales, scale. Awesome. Give it one more moment. Perfect. I'm going to end that and share the results. Looks like finance and sales are in the lead, but we have a good distribution all around. So we will make sure to take these needs into note into our future programming. Thank you again so much, Bernadette, for joining us. It was truly a pleasure. And we hope that you all can join us again soon for future programming. Bye, everyone.
thank you.